Now, by now, most are familiar with the school deputy controversy out in South Carolina. Officer Ben Fields, he was seen on 2 video recordings slamming a black female student to the ground in front of her classmates after she refused to leave the classroom. But apparently there was also another video that showed the student striking the officer. After an investigation, the South Carolina sheriff decided to fire the deputy. Joining me now by phone, Sheriff David Clarke, Milwaukee County Sheriff. Sheriff Clarke, thanks for joining me. You probably saw the videos. I'm not sure if anyone saw the third one, but was that the right decision that was made today?
Well, first of all, I don't have all the facts. I don't have all the information, witness statements, the officer's statement. And so I got to be real careful because I don't like knee-jerk reactions, and I think that's what happened here. The sheriff down there could do whatever he wants to do, but I think he got a little bit out ahead of his skis in this quick period of time to have made that decision, and I heard that it was based on the video. The videos don't tell the whole story. But, these things, when an officer uses force, it's never pretty. It's not designed to be pretty. It's designed to be effective. When an officer uses force, I expect that force to be reasonable and to be effective. Okay, we don't call it slamming people to the ground, but we will take people to the ground. We call it decentralization. Those are the words we use. So I think sometimes when we use some of this language like brutality and like slamming to the ground, there's a little bit of hyperbole involved there, and it's done to incite and inflame.
Are there parameters when you take someone to the ground? Should they have a weapon? Should they pose a threat? Are there any times when you back off and say, I don't necessarily need to take this particular person to the ground?
That's up to the officer. It's called the reasonable officer standard, and the officer gets to make those assessments and decisions and has to do so in split-second fashion and has to do so on the fly. So if one officer comes along and says, well, I would have done something else, okay, fine, that's good. If another officer comes along and says, well, I would have decentralized that person and taken him to the ground and get him in cuffs, then you look and you say, well, is it reasonable? Yeah, that's okay, too. Everybody thinks that there should be only one way to do things, and it should be the nice way, when the reality is, when force has to be used, it's because someone is not complying with a law enforcement officer's lawful command. Right. Now, it still has to be reasonable. It cannot be unreasonable force. If he picks a desk up and starts slamming the person over the head, that would be savage physical violence, which is the definition of brutality. My understanding, and I have limited information on this case, nobody was injured. So how can anybody say this was brutal? No, it was a use of force. And what happens after that is for the people down in South Carolina to sort out.
I know you can't. I'm just going to ask you to speculate just a little bit with me about the sheriff firing the deputy today. If all of the Black Lives Matter movement, all of the media pressure, do you think that might have played a role? Because you believe it was hasty at the very least.
Sure, it was not administratively. The deputy, I don't even know if I would have done that. I mean, you got to conduct an investigation. You maybe get him out of the school, reassign him, and administrative duty's okay. But yeah, I think. I mean, my guess would be that does play a role in some of this right now. I think it's unfortunate because you cannot allow, when you're in a position to make these decisions like he is and like I am on a daily basis, you have to tune all that stuff out. You have to take your time. And I think to have made that decision within 24 hours is more. It appears to be more knee-jerk than anything. And my guess would be he's probably been influenced by some of this outside stuff.
Speaking of which, you were attacked in a newspaper column. A New York Daily News, they hired Sean King. And one of his first columns out the gate was comments about your recent comments on police brutality. He really came at you for denying the existence of police brutality and saying that police racism, that there's not in the heart of police officers. What are your thoughts? Because the backlash and the support for you has been overwhelming.
Well, as for this Sean King guy, consider the source. This is a guy who's been passing himself off as black when he's basically a white guy. And for him to call me and Uncle Tom, first of all, the names don't bother me. But for a white guy to call a black guy and Uncle Tom, it doesn't even fit the model. Usually that's reserved for black people referring to other black people. So this whole thing is the world's upside down. But I have said words matter. And when people with a broad stroke, and that's what this Black Lives Matter movement has done, they have painted broad strokes They've said all police are racist, all police are corrupt, all police are brutal. None of that is true. Not as a custom, not as a practice, not as a culture, not as an institution. The definition, Charles, of brutality is savage physical violence. That definition might apply to ISIS. That definition might apply to Planned Parenthood and some of those ugly videos we saw of sucking fetuses out of wombs, cutting up the baby parts, and selling them on the open market. That is savage physical violence. To say when a police officer uses force, even in some instances where it's excessive force, it isn't brutality, it's excessive force. But to me, words matter because our character, our integrity is being slandered right now with no substantiation and no basis. The Black Lives Matter movement still thinks that Mike Brown was murdered by police officer Darren Wilson. He was not. That was ruled justifiable self-defense.
Right.
They think the same thing about Eric Garner. They think the same thing about Freddie Gray when the coroner's report said Freddie Gray's injuries are consistent with being in an accident and not the result of criminal activity. That's what the court is down there to figure out.
Sheriff Clarke, I will tell you, I've been attacked by Sean King on Twitter, too, so anytime I could be in the same fraternity as you, I'm proud. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you taking out the time.
Anytime, Charles.
Hey,